Hello, hello, hello. Okay. Okay, thanks, Andy. Sorry for the late, 10 minutes late because I restarted my machine and then it didn't work properly. Okay, so now yesterday we discussed about history of SQL Server versions and editions. So and then software life cycle we discussed about, and then the product updates. Those things we discussed about in yesterday class. In today class, we are going to discuss about installation and configuration. So this is very important topic for us, database administrators. We must have good knowledge on installation and configuration, but it is not a regular activity for us. Not we cannot say that it is a daily activity. We cannot install SQL Server on daily basis, but monthly, maybe 4 installations, 5 installations, based on their requirement and the need, we can get the server installation request. So in in few organizations, they're maintaining the two different teams. Like one is installation and configurations. One team specifically working on the installations, and then configurations. If they use environment, then they will be having the two different teams. Like one for server builds, one for normal operations. So in my current organization, we have only one team, and the one team is responsible for installation and configurations as well. And so in the installation and configuration topic, so what are the things we will discuss means pre-installation. So what are the steps we need to take care before installing the SQL Server? And the second one is the installation steps. And the third one is the post installation. So generally we can call it as a post installations or maybe configuration steps. And we'll also discuss about what are the common issues we encounter during the installations, and also removing uninstalling the SQL Server software. So these things also we'll discuss, right? And then finally interview question and answers topic. So right, so let's start with the pre-installation. Let me open the document. Like as I said that yesterday we discussed about various versions and editions, right? So till 2008 R2, those are the outdated versions. That's mean we don't get any request for installing SQL Server 2000 or before 2012 versions. That's mean 2008 or 2008 R2 5. Those are totally outdated versions, so no need to worry about installing and configuring those versions. So 2012 and above versions are like those are the available versions: 2012, 14, 16, 17, and 19. So this document specifically designed for 2012, but we will install the SQL Server 2016 because in real-time environment nowadays we'll get the more requests related to SQL Server 2016 installation than comparing with 2012 and 2014. So this document will related to the 2012, but we will install the SQL Server 2016. So again, so there is some differences in 2012 and 2016 and above versions. Again, those differences also will cover during the installation. Okay. Right, as I said, then the installations contain the three different type of steps: pre-installation, installation, and then configuration. So again, in the pre-installation step, in the pre-installations, we can divide it into three different prerequisites or maybe pre-installation steps. Those are hardware level, software level, and software specification. That's mean whenever someone is asking us to install the SQL Server, first we need to look at the prerequisites. If all prerequisites are good, then only we can install the SQL Server. So these pre-installation steps we divided into three ways, like hardware level software and software specifications. When it comes to the hardware, so like in the hardware with the operating system, so on which server we are installing, which operating system, which window, which OS we are installing, that OS is support the install SQL Server or not, we need to verify that. For example, if somebody is asking to install SQL Server 2000, SQL Server 2012 on Windows Server 2003, so Windows Server 2003 cannot support SQL Server 2012. So that's mean here the important point is that whether operating system is compatible with SQL Server version or not, we need to verify that. Okay. Here, if you want to install SQL Server 2012, operating system should be running with Windows Server 2003 with Service Pack 2 or Windows 2008 and above versions, right? So where we can find this kind of information, whether operating system is compatible or not. If you want to find this kind of information, we can go to the software Microsoft site, or maybe so Microsoft site we can find the that information. Also we can find the same information when you download the software in this when once you download the SQL Server software, there we can see the hardware and software prerequisites. There also we can find the whether what mean the version is compatible with uh, which operating system. The first point is that whether operating system is compatible with SQL Server or not, we need to verify that. So here, this is for 2012. For example, I mean Windows Server 2003 with Service Pack 2 or above versions we require. When it comes to the SQL Server 2016, it should be Windows Server 2012 and above versions required. Right? So 2004 and 2014 and 2012, it's applicable for Windows Server 2003 with Service Pack 2 or where above version. But SQL Server 2016 and above versions, we require the operating system Windows Server 2016. Don't get confused. Okay, so the second one is that RAM. So we required minimum 1 GB. I mean, we can go with the 1 GB, but recommended it 2 GB RAM recommended. But in real-time environment, so many people they will use the 4 GB as the default RAM for SQL Server installation. So based on operations and then requirement, we can add more RAM. But most of the organization, their default RAM for operating system is 4 GB. Okay, but we can install SQL Server with 1 GB, but recommended is 2 GB for SQL Server 2012 and 2014. When it comes to the SQL Server 2016 and above version, again we can install in 1 GB, but the Microsoft recommendation RAM is 4 GB for SQL Server 2016 and above versions. Right? And coming to the CPU, so 1.0 gigahertz speed for 32-bit operating systems and 1.4 gigahertz speed for 64-bit, and recommended speed is 2.0 gigahertz speed. This applicable for all the versions from SQL Server 2012 and all above versions. And the fourth operating system prerequisite is that we required a minimum 6 GB hard disk space for installing SQL Server. Like if you remember yesterday we discussed about various services like OLTP, OLAP, and the reporting services, integration services, right? If you want to install all services, we required 6 GB, minimum 6 GB hard disk space we required, right? If you just want to go for only one particular service, we don't require. But if you want to go for all, then minimum we require the 6 GB hard disk free space. So these four we can call it as a hardware level prerequisites. So once validated these things, then we are fine with that. Then we need to look at the software level prerequisites. So those are .NET Framework 3.5, PowerShell, SQL Server native client, SQL Server setup supported files, Microsoft Windows Installer 4.5 or later versions. So here, Microsoft Windows Installer and .NET PowerShell 2.0, it comes along with the operating system installations. No need to much worry about it, right? And the second one is that SQL Server native client and SQL Server supported files. So these will these we need to install through SQL Server software. After installing these two components, only we can install the main components. During installation, we'll see that. Right? And the final one and important one is the .NET Framework 3.5 or later version. So this is for 2012 installation document. So for 2012 installation, 2012 or 2014, it applicable. .NET Framework 3.5 is required. But from SQL Server 2016 and above versions, we require the .NET Framework 4.6. Without .NET Framework, we cannot install the SQL Server. If you're trying to install, the installation will be failed. So this is very, very important prerequisites for SQL Server installation. Okay, 2012 we required the 2012 and 2014 we required the 3.55 version, and from SQL Server 2016 and above versions we required the for .NET Framework 4.6 and above versions. And the next, so these we can call it as a software level prerequisites, And once you read about these, then after that you need to look at the software specifications. Just even just now.
Not made.
1 minute only. Okay, so anyway, we are my headset is not working. I'm using the computer audio. So that's mean after completing hardware level prerequisites and then software level prerequisite, then we have to we need to look into the specifications are like what editions we need to install, what versions we need to select. Like as I said that we have a different edition, standard edition, developer edition, enterprise editions, right? So we have to select the edition, which edition we need to install, and again version also we need to get it. Editions mean 2020 and 19. So those we can call it as a software. We need to get the details about editions and web details. The second one is the 32-bit server we need to install. I mean, which bit version we need to select. That is also we need to get the detail. So most probably, so 99% cases we are only installing the 64-bit. So we don't install the 32-bit because there is some I mean, memory related, performance related. Then Microsoft is strongly recommended to use the 64-bit rather than 32-bit. And apart from this one, so we also need to get the details about on which location, which drive we need to select for data file, and like when the various files. Later classes will discuss data log files and backup, and then TimDB. So we need to get the location details where we need to place the data file, where we need to place the log file, and then backup location, and also installation location, on which location we need to install the SQL Server software binaries and TimDB location. There is a one database called Tim database. Later classes will discuss more about it. Again, TimDB database we need to separately place in different drive. So in the separate drive. So we need to get the all the details. So like in many cases, in real-time environment, no need to ask every time for which drive we need to install, which log, which which location we need to use it for data file and log file, because we have to maintain the standard. So in our cases, data file for data file we are using the D drive, and log file we are using the L drive, and then backup we are using H drive, and TempDB we are using the T drive. So this is the standard procedure. But interview point of view, we have highlighted so this point where we need to get the details. And if you in your organization, if your organization following any standard procedure for data file log file, we must follow the same procedure, right? And then once we get the data file log file, backup information, backup location, installation location, TempDB location, then after that we need to get the details about SQL Server name details. Like we have default name, and then we can specify our own names, like default installation and named instance, named installations, we call it two names. Default means whatever name the operating system is having, the same name will comes to the SQL Server, that we can call it as a default installation. Named installation means named installation in the sense we can give our own name to the SQL Server. If you specify your name, if you specify the name apart from operating system, then we can call it as a named installations. So in single operating system, we can install one as a default instance, and remaining 49 we install as a named installations. But in real time, we don't recommend it to install more than one server because of for considering the performance related other performance and related other related thing. We should not go for installing more than one SQL server for operating system. But as for Microsoft, so we can install 49 different installation in single operating system. One is the default instance, one is the named installation. In most of the organizations, people prefer to go for the default installation. Even in our current project, we are also installing as a default instance, right? So in the installation, we'll see that where we can select the default or named installation, that we will discuss in the installation topic. And the next important one is the features or services selections. Like means features in the sense different components or maybe different services, we can say that, like OLTP, integration services, reporting services, and all services, right? So there are different services Microsoft is providing for the database operations. Like here, we need to get the details about like OLTP. We need to install. I mean, what services we need to install. Uh, Database engine services or anal services, reporting services, integration services. That information we need to get in. The final one is that collation settings. Collation settings in the sense language specification. So the Microsoft is developing their software for different languages. So which language, for which language you want to use the SQL Server software, so that based on that we need to select the collation settings. Like we have, if you are working for your SQL Server is working for Chinese related application, then we have to select the appropriate Chinese collation setting. For whereas long based on the language, we need to select the collation setting. If unfortunately if we not do the right collation settings during the installation, don't worry about it, because after completing the installation also we can see in the collation settings. Then we missed one is that service account. Service account, generally you can define the service account is a normal account, but if you're using for any service to run, then simply you can call it as a service account for the particular service. So in real-time environment, what they will do that they will have one generic account. That's mean it's a, we can call it as a group account. That group account they will use it for SQL Server for SQL Server service account. That's mean whatever the group account, when the group account, whatever permissions the group account has, based on that permission, the SQL Server operations will functioning. Like accessing the drive, accessing the network, storage. So whatever permission the service account has, based on that permission, the SQL Server operations will execute, right? So we should not use our individual accounts, because if you're using individual account, if some particular person is leave for the project or maybe leave for the organization, their account will be, that means organization will disable the account. If account is disabled, again SQL Server will not functioning. So that's the reason. So people prefer to use the generic account, group account for running the SQL Server services. Again, so in real-time environment, they have their own standard account. So we have to use that account for SQL Server services. So that's mean whenever you want to install SQL Server, we need to ensure to verify all the prerequisites. If everything is fine and we have all the information, then we go for installing SQL Server. These are very important interview perspective. That's mean in these questions you have to highlight about all the pre-installation steps or maybe prerequisites. Right, if you're clear about pre-installation steps, the next one is that installation. So let's go to the, I'll send the software file, software download link. So as it is that from 2016 onwards, developers we can use it. Or from 2014 onwards, we can use the developer. We can download and we can use it, and it has the same features. The enterprise, whatever enterprises have the feature, the same features we can get in the developer. So double click on it. So I download as a disk image, so double click on it. Okay, and so it's not so not extracting, not mount and this. So what we can do then? So if it is a disk file, we can unzip those files. I think something. Okay, because it doesn't have free space. So the one of the difference is in SQL Server 2012 and 2016 is that SSMS will comes along with the SQL Server software installation in SQL Server 2012 and 2014. But from 2016 onwards, we have to separately install the SSMS. So SSMS means Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio. This is the editor which we can use to manage all the SQL related operations. So this is the one of the difference. So from 2016 and above versions, we have to separately install the SSMS. Right. So once you download, most of the cases, the file we can download, it will download as a disk or image file. So we have to extract. Once extract, we can get the all these kind of files. So here we have to select the this file. So this is an application, not a setup.exe file. This is the XML configurational file. Select setup file, and here we can see that application. This is the right file to install. Double click on it and click as. So we don't require any downtime for installing, so we can do it at any time. So once validating all the prerequisites and everything is fine, then we can directly install the software. right? So one important thing is that where we can verify the .NET framework install or not, because this is very very important prerequisite. So many people, I mean, they don't verify, and then they will, I mean, that installation will be failed. To verifying the .NET framework install or not, we can use the various options. So one of the ways is that control panel. Just go to control panel and uninstall program, and here turn Windows features. Here we can see that. So what versions of .NET Framework installed? Here in my machine, 3.5 and 4.6 both were installed. Right? So here we can verify. We can also use the installation programs. Here in the files we can use it. We can also use some PowerShell script. So if we don't have any scripts, then we can go to control panel and turn Windows features on or off. There we can see .NET Framework installed or not. So in case .NET Framework not installed in the operating system, what we need to do then? We need to contact the server team, Wintel team, system team. So different names we are using. The teams is responsible for installing operating systems, right? Installing operating systems or granting permissions on the operating system. Like operating system related all operations are doing by the Intel team, system team, or server team. So we can send an email, we can contact to them to install the .NET framework, so they can install it. So even if you have a admin privileges in the operating system, and we can also download the .NET framework from the Microsoft site, and we can also directly install the .NET framework, whatever version framework is required. If it is 3.5, then we need to download and install, and if it is 4.6, then the respective framework version we need to download and we need to install, right? And again, so PowerShell install or not, you can also verify that. Like you can go to, so no need to worry about it, because PowerShell is 100%. It comes along with the operating system. If you want, we can also go to run command, type PowerShell. We get this window, then and here we can see that we get this window, then PowerShell is installed on that. If we want to look for a version, then we have to use some PowerShell commands to get the versions. Those we can get it from the internet. Like the framework is very very important. Without that, we cannot install the SQL Server software.
So the Windows team will install these softwares, right, Malesh?
Yeah, so
PowerShell.
usually they are the responsible for like .NET framework installation and then PowerShell. So no need to worry about PowerShell. PowerShell 100% will comes along with the operating system installation. And so there is a one more prerequisite, Windows installer. Windows installer is also comes along with the operating system. If any reasons a framework is not installed in the operating system, we'll contact the Windows team. So because they can install it, and if they're maybe if you have a permission to install, you can directly download the .NET framework. Just you can go to internet and then you can download. Offline framework we have. Here we can see that 4.5. So download that. So here we can, this is the link which will automatically route to the Microsoft, and you can download and you can directly install in the operating system. Because in the many organizations, .NET framework is the default installation for the operating system. That is the reason. So the Windows team ensure that the framework is installed along with the operating system. For many reasons, some reason they are not installed, we have to ask them to install, or maybe we can directly download from Microsoft site and we can install it.
Okay, what is the default Windows installer version? 4.5 or?
It's based on the operating system version. So that we can find in, again, in Windows installer file, we can find in features. So because the file is I mean, what that application will do, that means like whenever you are installing software and installing the software, those will be controlled by the Windows installer application. So that comes along with the operating system. I think in the older versions we can see that whether it is installed or not.
Okay, fine, no problem.
Yeah. So those two will comes most of the cases. Those will to PowerShell, and then Windows installer will comes along with the operating system, right? So once you double click the software, then we'll get this window. So planning, this is the, after double click on the setup.txt, we'll get this window. Here we can see the different options in the left side: planning, installation, maintenance, tools, resource, advanced options, right? Here in the planning, we can find all the documentations like hardware and software requirements. And this is the one of the important. We can also get the some online documentation information. So those kind of information we can find here, like all related to documentation. The second important one is that options. Like as I said that we have 32-bit and 64-bit installation, right? If operating system the operating system whatever bit version is as, so SQL Server will select the same bit for installing SQL Server. Here my operating system is x64, so by default it is selecting the x64. So if we want to go for x86, then we have to select the x86. So from, I think from 2016 onwards, mm, they are not releasing the x86 because they are only releasing the x64. That's the reason we don't enable the x86. But if you're trying to install 2012 or 2014, we have an option to select the x86 as well as x64. X64 means 64-bit and x86 means 32-bit. Okay. If you want to change, we can change it here, like before 2016 versions. So in the later, like we will for upgrading and various operations, we can use the other tabs here. So now let's go to the installation. If you want to install, then we have to select the installation tab. In the installation tab, the first option we need to select the SQL Server installation. New SQL Server standalone installations or add features to an existing installation. Like another important point is that we have a two different type of installations, like standalone installation and then cluster installation. Cluster is a availability concept. So later classes will discuss about the um, SQL Server failover cluster installations. Now just go with the standalone server installations. And again, in many organizations, I think 60 to 70% of servers they're managing as a standalone servers. Maybe 30 to 40% of servers they're maintaining as a cluster servers. In the later classes, we'll discuss about cluster installation. Now we'll focus on only the standalone cluster, standalone installation. Okay. If it is a standalone installation, then select the first option. Click next. So here we can select developer or express edition evaluation version. So we can also download evaluation version, but it support only 180 days. Like after 180 date it will expire. But when installing evaluation version, so we can also have the enterprise features. So whatever enterprise version has, the same kind of features we get in evaluation version. So
So is this a developer version or an enterprise edition? The software which you have taken, Malesh?
no, I'm installing as a developer instance because I
No,
download from internet.
yeah, you downloaded the developer version from the Microsoft site, right?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. So even after downloading the developer version, we get three options. Got it.
Yeah, developer evaluation express, but we cannot get enterprise edition, BA edition, or standard edition. Those are totally cost based softwares. So because developer evaluation express, these we can use it as a like free versions we can call it.
Okay, thanks.
And we have to accept the license and terms. Click next. We can uncheck use Microsoft Update to check for updates. No need to do that because if you enable it, it will try to look for the recent updates and trying to install. So later also we can install. So we can uncheck this one and click next and click next. Yeah. So in the prerequisites, we discussed about setup supported files, right? So those will install here, install setup files. We go to the yeah here SQL Server native client and supported files. Those will install in this bot. Okay, install rules. So here in the installation rules, the important thing is that we need to ensure that all the status has passed. So if you see any failed, we cannot go to the next option. So if you see any warnings, then we can, it's okay. But if any component is failed to the status failed, then we cannot go to the next step. Here we can see that almost 4 passed and 1 warning. So Windows firewall, when you disable Windows firewall, usually you'll get this warning, but it can be ignorable. Okay. Even if you get this warning in real time, we can ignore and we can click next.
So mostly there will be no firewall on the, I mean, on your existing product or in either in production environment, right?
So it's depend on their security concerns because so in many organizations they disable it, but some organizations they don't disable it. But 95 cases they will disable the firewall
Okay.
for security reasons. And then click next. And here this is the important window. Here we have to select the features or maybe services. What are the services you want to select? Here database engine services. Database engine means OLTP, and analysis services means OLAP. Reporting services means we can use it for reporting operations, and all shared features. These we can call it as a developer tools like application, and usually will install these shared features. So it's not mandatory to install on the operating system, but in real time environment people prefer to install all shared features, right? And so whatever they requested, whatever services they requested, those services they select. For example, they said that database engine services, then we have to select the database engine. And from 2016 onwards, Microsoft added few other services related to database engine. So those are R services. So R service means it's a kind of service mainly using for data science, data analytical purpose. They're using these services, and these services support the Python language. So mainly these services using for analytical operations, data science, the kind of operations.
So database engine service is nothing but
OLTP.
OLTP, and analysis service means
OLTP.
OLAP.
OLAP, correct, exactly.
Okay, analysis service OLAP. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So again, so here our services is added from SQL Server 2016. So this is support Python language, and for analytical operation they are using. Again, so we need to ask whether they require our services or not. If they don't require, then we can better uncheck this. And data quality services, poly-based query service for external data. So big data is a different concepts, like big data. If you want to retrieve or analysis or doing any kind of operation, then we have to use the poly-based query service for external data. So that means when people saying that we need database engine services, we need to ask that whether do you require R services and fully based query services and data quality services. If they said they require, then we need to enable it. If they don't require, then we can uncheck those. Uh, so here I'm just selecting SQL Server replication. Replication is one of the data moving concept. Usually we don't ask that customer whether it's required or not, because it should be comes under SQL Server. But we specifically ask whether they require R services, data quality services, and poly based for the services. Even sometimes customer doesn't know that what are service and what are data quality services, and poly based, even they know they need or they don't need. In that case, better we can install, and if they don't they're not using, just we can stop those services. Here I'm seeing database engine service, SQL Server replication, and only these I'm installing. Right? That means we are fully installing OLTP, and apart from that, we are also adding replication. Replication is a data movement. Support concept. This is here. So if customer is asking annual services, then we have to select the annual services. If customer requesting the reporting, reporting.
What about data quality?
It's again, I'm not sure about exactly because I haven't used it. So
The new feature in 2016.
database object.
So the service is not
Uh,
available in 2014 and 12.
it's available from 2012 and above.
Okay, so it's available, but we are not using. Okay, okay, I'll explore. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you. So one important thing is that in few organizations they will install all features. So in the previous organization we install everything, but if the customer is not using, so just we disable it. But in the current project, we are specifically ask the customer what services they require. Based on that, we will install those particular components only. So it's dependent, totally depend on their organization standards. So we must also follow their standards. So any doubts here for selecting the components? Very simple. Like we have to ask what services, what component they require. Based on that, we have to select the installation.
So if you take particular server or a database SQL Server, so how do you know which service are being used or which are enabled?
Sorry, Praveen.
Now, if you take one SQL Server, so
Mhm.
how do we know which service are enabled or which service are being used by customer? Like if they enable all the things, how do we know what are the services being used by customer or client?
So the first thing, I mean, what services installed or not, we can find that information in the configuration manager. So once we identify that, we need to ask them whether, uh, go to configuration manager. Here we can see that SQL Server browser is default one. Here we can see the full text services. SQL Server agent. These two comes under the database services. So we need to ask like if you're installing reporting services, any reports are configured or not, and that we will get it in button. Here నేను
Okay. Okay.
reporting services అనేది report services system and verify చేయొచ్చు. Manually we can verify. So once install the server, we will check that whether any reports configure, any analysis databases created for the particular instance or not. That we can manually verify.
Okay. Yeah, got it.
We can also manually verify. We'll see that after installing the server, we'll see that how to verify whether the service is in using by someone or not. That will verify it later.
Okay, thanks.
So once you select the required components, then after that we need to specify the location. So where that files need to install. So by default, it is pointing to C drive. You separate drive for components. Then we have to select the drive name. And then click next. So this is another important. So here we can see the default instance and named instance. When you specify when you select the default instance, whatever name operating system has, the same name will comes to the SQL Server. So we don't need to specify any name. And if you select the named instance, then we have to SQL 2016. Most of the environments, they just go with the default instance. Organization might go with the named instance. Again, it's depend on their organization standards. We have to select. But we have to go with the default instance or named instance. Default means no need to specify the name to the SQL Server. Named instance means we must specify the name to the. And in a single operating system, we can install one as a default instance, remaining 49 as a named instance. But usually we don't install more than one instance in a operating system. The SQL Server name as SQL Server 2016, and
What about ID? It will pick up the same thing as named instance ID.
yes,
Yeah. Okay, okay, fine.
automatically it will detect. No need to specify anything. Yeah. So when you select the database engine services OLTP, so two services will come for the OLTP. One is SQL Server database engine service and SQL Server agent. And whatever components you selected, whether database engine service, OLAP, or reporting services, SQL Server browser service is common. And we selected the full text search services, so it is also comes to the services. Right? Browser service is default component or service for whatever component we install on a operating system. Okay. So here in this installation, we selected database engine services, full text search. For database engine services, we have two services, SQL Server Agent and SQL Server Database Engine Services. And full text search for, as we selected full text search service, that comes to the, it will control all the searching things. Right. Again, here we need to specify the service account name. So every organization has their own group account or generic account, we can call it. So those accounts we need to get it from our lead or maybe senior team members, because they know the service account. If you know the account, then during the installation we can specify. Even after installing SQL, we can change service account. Maybe if you don't get the service account, no need to stop the installation. So we just go with the default accounts. So these are the default service account. We just go with the default service account. But once you get the service account, the right service account, we can apply the service account even in the later after installing the SQL Server.
So there
So
will be only one service account, or how?
yes. So people prefer to use different service account based on the services. For example, if you're installing OLTP and OLTP, so they have one account for one separate account for OLTP services, one separate account for OLTP. Again, it's depend on the organization standards. But in current project, we have only one service account for all services.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So my service account is Malesh. So uh, money, definitely. Then after that, we need to. Sorry, it's not yet recognized. Okay. So then after that, we need to enter the password for this account. So many people are giving new password. So whatever Malesh account has and what password Malesh account has, the same password we need to enter here. Okay. And do it for the database engine services as well. Just simply copy and then enter the password. And then comes to this startup type. Here we can see that manual. So the default is manual, but in real time we have to use the automatic. That means when operating system is restarted without manual intervention, the SQL services will automatically start. If it is a manual, for any reasons operating system is restarted, the services will not start. We need to manually start it. So that's the reasons to minimize this kind of manual effort. We need to ensure to put the startup type in automatic state, right? So full text search, it will use the default. Here we cannot change during the installation for these two accounts, but after installing, if you want, you can change the service accounts. But in real time environment, no need to change the service account for these two services, right? So like we are also comparing 2012 and 2016 installations. One of the installation different is grant platform volume maintenance task privilege to SQL Server database engine services. So this is the option is available from SQL Server 2016 and above. So using this option, so like whenever it will improve the read and write operations for the SQL operations when it is using the drive. Perform volume maintenance task privileged to SQL Server database engine services. This privilege enable instance file installation by avoiding zeroing of data pages. That's mean in the architecture classes you'll understand how the data is processing from SQL Server to databases. That time again I will explain about the volume maintenance task, how it will be useful, how it will be working. That time we will discuss. But this option is only available from SQL Server 2016 and above. Before that, we don't have this option, right? So we have to separately enable, but from 2016 onwards, during installation, we can enable it, this option, right? So once specify the service account, it is an optional, it is not mandatory. So whether you want to use it, you can enable or you can uncheck this one. Once you specify the service account this option, then the second tab is that collation. Here in the collation means language specification. So usually we will go with the default collation settings. That is the default collation setting is SQL Latent 1 General CP1 CIAS. That is a default collation settings, and it will support the Latent General all UK and US based English. So if you want to use different collation settings, you can click the customize button, and here in the bottom we can see the different collation settings. Then we can also select here. You can see that Ireland, Japanese, Korean, different collation settings we have. You can select here and collation settings. Most it
So
is,
if it is English or US region, so it would be the same.
yeah,
Latin.
just we can go with the default one.
Okay.
SQL General CP1 CIA. That's the default one. Even if no need to worry about, even if you select the wrong collation settings during the installation, then later we can change the collation setting.
Okay.
Then we'll see that how to change the collation settings for the SQL Server.
Okay. Thanks.
And then after selecting the collation settings, then click next. So the first step is that server configuration. So here we have the authentication server. That means server accessing mode. Like SQL Server support two different type of modes: Windows authentication mode and mode. Again, don't worry about this topic now because we have a security topic that time we'll understand more about Windows authentication mode and mixed mode authentication. We have a, I think, 1 day class for these things. But here, select the mixed mode authentication. So here I'm selecting mixed mode authentication. When you select the mixed mode authentication, you need to enter the password because when you select the mixed mode authentication,
Your voice is breaking, Malesh. Can you be a bit louder? కొంచెం గట్టిగా మాట్లాడండి వాయిస్ స్లోగా
ఓకే నేను మ్యూట్ చేస్తానండి ఉమ్మగారు మీ దగ్గర నుంచి కొంచెం సౌండ్ వస్తుంది.
ఓకే
Okay, so here we have to select like authentication modes means access related things we'll separately discuss in the security topic. But here I'm just selecting, so no need to much worry about what is Windows and what is mixed mode authentication. Just here select the mixed mode option. So when you select the mixed mode authentication, one account, SI account will created in SQL Server with administrator privileges. So here, when you select the mixed mode authentication, you need to enter the password for SI account. So the second here in the bottom, we can see the specify the SQL Server administrators, like add current user. So this SQL Server I'm installing, I connected my this operating system with the Malles account, and add current user means Malles account will add it in SQL Server with administrator privileges. Still clicking. We can see that admin Malles. So this account will create it in SQL Server with the admin privileges. Like if we want to add more accounts, then we can click the add button, and here we can specify the group accounts or maybe individual accounts, and then click OK. The account will also added in SQL Server with administrator privileges. So in few organizations just they go with the Windows authentication, but in many organizations I think they are also using the mixed mode authentication.
So if it is a Windows authentication, it will be an AD login.
Yes, exactly, right.
Okay. Anyway, we need to add the group anyway, but still it will be an AD account, AD authorized. Okay.
Yeah, Windows means only it will allow the AD account, AD based accounts, but mixed mode means AD accounts or normal accounts. What is AD accounts? What is normal account? How it will be functioning? How validating? Those we will discuss in security talk.
Okay.
So once you specify the when you select the as mixed mode, we need one account to it. So it's not SM is not non-AD account. It will create it in SQL Server. That account password we need to enter here. Just remember the point. Don't worry about the remaining authentication. And then after specifying these information, then we can go to data directories. So in the prerequisites, we discussed about data file location, log file location, temdb location, backup directory, right? Backup location. So Microsoft strongly recommended to separate the data file, log file. I mean, that means individual drives, individual location. We have to use it for data files, log file, backup, and temdb. So, but here, so in my case, I don't have multiple drives. So what I did, so I created, I mean, I'm using F drive here, but in F drive, I created multiple folders like SQL Server 226, backup, data, log, and root, and maybe binary you can call it. And the next folder is MDB. Okay, but ensure that in real-time environment we have a separate drive for MDB, separate drive for root, separate for log, separate for data, separate for backup. Okay. It's totally depend on organization standards. Whatever policy, whatever method they're using, we must follow those standards. But many organizations, in the current organization, we for SQL Server we are creating 5 different individual drives for SQL Server operations. One for data, one for log, one for TimeDB, one for root, one for backup. So here yeah, I'm using F drive, but in F drive I created multiple folders. But in real time, we have a separate drives instead of different folders in single drive. So root directory means system databases files will be created here. Just click this button, and then after that, SQL installation, slip 115. And then the second user database directory. And as a data. And for log directory, same location. Folder name is log. And backup directory. Okay. So but in real time, we have to use the different drives instead of single drive. Why we need to use the multiple drives means it will improve the IO operations. Like if you everything if you put in single drive, then maybe we can encounter when data or inserting the data. It will take the long time to complete the read and write operations. That's the reason to improve the SQL Server IO operations, like read and write operations. We must use the multiple drives. Okay. So once specify the data directories of locations, then the next step is TimDB. So again, so another difference between 2012 installation and 26 installation is that TimDB. In 2012, there is no 2012 and 2014 installation. There is no separate tab for TimDB. TimDB file information also we can get in data directories. But from 2016 onwards, they create, we have a separate tab for TempDB configuration. So here we need to specify the TempDB data location and log location. Okay. So we can, if we specify, you can specify that. Even after installing SQL Server, we can also change the locations if we want. During installation, we can specify it here.
About sizes, so number of files, size,
Correct.
should we leave default?
Yes. So here, so we have to follow some standard configurations options for TempDB specifically, only the TempDB. So TempDB files should be based on the CPU cores, based on the whatever CPU cores, CPUs we are using. Based on the core count, we have to specify the TempDB files. So this is a very strong recommendation for TempDB configuration to improve the TempDB related operations. So before 2016, after installing the SQL Server, we need to manually create the TempDB files. We need to verify the core numbers, and then based on the core numbers, we need to manually create the file. But in 2016 onwards, it will automatically detect the number of files, number of size, auto growth settings. So that's mean number of files automatically created. It will automatically detect based on the core file. But before 2016, we need to manually create these files after installing the SQL Server. The initial size means the TempDB will create it with 8 MB, and auto growth is 64 MB. That means once 8 MB completed, by 64 MB, it will automatically grow. Total initial size, initial size for 8, that means single file. So we are creating 4 files, that means 32. And auto growth 64 means the total 4 files 256. And again, so we have in the database architecture classes how to create the multiple files. So these things will also will discuss about how data file is functioning, log file is functioning, what kind of information will store in data file and log file. All these things we'll discuss in database architecture class. So this is the one of the best option from SQL Server 2016 onwards, because no need to worry to configure the TempDB after installing. So during installation, we'll configure the TempDB. So my core count is 4. If you want to look at the core information, go to Task Manager. Logical processors or logical processor cores, you can see that 4. And then based on the core number, it will create the core file. And this is for the log file. TempDB has data file and log file, and the other one is the data file information. This is for the log file. Initial size is 8 MB for log file, and auto growth is 64. And this is the
By default, it will take knowledge.
yeah, the location will automatically it will detect the default. Even after installing, if maybe if it selecting the wrong location, because if you don't want to put the TempDB files in this location, what we can do that later after installing the SQL Server, we can change the file location. That, or else you can remove or you can add. SQL installation. I'm selecting now TempDB. So if you select the root directory location, it will take it as a by default. We can remove and we can add the file location. So after specifying all this information like file size, if you want, you can change the file names if you want. It's a recommended if you want. If you don't want to go for 4 files, you can also select 2 files or 3 files, whatever. But this is very important interview question, like what are the recommendations to configure the TempDB? One of the recommendations is that we need to create the TempDB files based on the logical processors, and we need to maintain the equal size for the equal initial size, equal auto growth for the TempDB files, and yeah, we have to place the TempDB files in a separate location. So these are the few important recommendations. Apart from that, these recommendations, we have also other recommendations. Later, we'll discuss about it. And once complete the TempDB, because I mean many times I'm saying that we'll discuss later because installation is covering everything, but installation I cannot. We'll get confused like explaining everything. So everything, whatever I'm saying that we'll discuss in the later classes, that definitely will cover. And then after specifying these things, then click the file stream. So file stream is an optional service. If you want, you can enable or you can disable it. So what file stream will do that? Like we have, generally we can store the, two different type of data, uh, like normal integer floating. The kind of data will be go to the data file, database services. We can also store the video files, audio files, and PDF files, Word files, right? So if you want to manage, if you want to store this kind of unstructured data, structured data, unstructured data. So usually structured data will be storing in the databases in the most cases, 99%. If you want to manage, if you want to use unstructured data like video files, media files, big images, and PDF files, Word files, if you want to manage this kind of data, then we have to enable the file stream. It is totally optional, so very rare cases they're using. If their requirement is to use the unstructured data, then we have to enable. Again, during the installation we can enable. After installing SQL Server also we can enable the file stream. Here I'm not enabling file stream. I don't want to store any kind of unstructured data. Here we can see that, so that's mean whatever components, whatever options we specified for the installation, every information will be storing in configuration file at INI. So this is the default location. Even we select for apply for any other components, by default C problem files, Microsoft SQL Server 130 setup bootstrap log, and configuration file at INI. So in this location, then I will create. So this file contain whatever information we install, we specified for the SQL Server installation, all this information we can have. Because maybe somebody maybe if you want to analyze whether they selected the proper configuration settings or not, if you want to verify, we can go to this file location and we can open and we can see the what kind of options we selected for the installation. Okay, so we have a silent installation, like without we can also using the command mode, we can also install the SQL Server. And again, if you want to install SQL Server in the command mode, then we need to use the configuration file data. Okay, so once we can also verify that whether we have given the proper specification for the installation or not, we can validate here. And if everything is fine, then we have to click the install button. So we selected only database engine services, full text search, and so it doesn't take much time. But if you install all the components, nearly it will take 30 to 45 minutes time for installing all the components. So we selected only 2 components, so it will complete it in 10 to maybe 10 to 15, less than 10 minutes, or maybe 10 to 15 minutes time. So that's mean. So the difference is MDB configuration during the installations. File installation options we can select in 2016. That's the second difference. And the third one is that in 2016 onwards, we required the .NET Framework 4.6 or higher version. And the fourth one is then SSMS. SSMS will not install along with the services OLTP or OLAP. So that's mean we need to separately install the SSMS. So because we might get question like what are the differences between 2012 and 2016 installations, we have to tell it. And apart from that, in 2016 they added polybase connectivity for big data and R services. That's also available from only SQL Server 2016 and above versions. So once we'll complete the installation, we'll wrap up for the class, and then tomorrow we'll discuss about post installation steps, post installation, adding, removing, and if you have a time, what are the common problems we'll encounter during the installation and how to troubleshoot. So those things we'll plan for, we'll discuss on tomorrow. Let me note this as well. And so it's related to some necessary security connection related items. Let's click retry. Okay, it's saying that database engine services, full text search, semantic. Yeah, like means if successful, everything is successful, then we can see the status is succeeded. Like in our case, so it was failed. So if it is failed, then now we have to troubleshoot. Here is the for troubleshooting things, we can look into the details. Here we can see that what are the kind of problem we have. The connection was successfully established with the server, but then an occur during the login process. Certificate evasion. So here it is saying that it is failed with the connection related error. And we can also see the code, and we can also see the Microsoft links for related solution for troubleshooting. So, and again, your summary.txt file. Again, this file will be created in C program files, Microsoft SQL Server 130 setup bootstrap log. And if you click that, there also we can see that whether components are failed or success. The final result is failed. See details below, and what time start, what time it is completed. All right. And in the bottom, we can also see that error. Database engine service failed. See the logs for details. Error occurred during the setup process of the feature. Use the following information to resolve the error. So super. So like so it will also give the option. So the time to look into the failure. Failing installation. Right. So anyway, it's now 11:20. So we'll cover the failure remain things like how to identify, where we can identify the problem, and what are the areas we need to verify to identify the clear information for the failure, and how to troubleshoot. That will cover it in tomorrow again, and complete that and go to with the remaining things like configurations and adding or uninstalling the features for the particular instance. So I'll remain with this window. So we'll continue from tomorrow. So there are questions on Andy. So for like if you summarizing today's session, so we discussed about pre-installation and installation, and we also covered what are the differences between 2012 and 2016 installation. From 2012 2016 the same, but from 2016 onwards we have a differences. The same whatever differences we found in 2016, the same for 2017 and 2019. That's the today's session, Andy. So if you have any questions, if you don't have anything, then we'll wrap it now, and we'll continue from tomorrow, like after from this window. Like tomorrow the question, like where what are the places we need to verify to identify the causes of the particular installation fail. And then after resolving, then we'll look into the configuration and troubleshooting. Just చూడండి.
వాయిస్ కట్ అవుతుంది మళ్ళీ.
వాయిస్ కట్ అవుతుందండి అది.
ఆ, ఆ.
అంటే ఇప్పుడేనండి మొత్తం క్లాస్ అంతా అలా
లేదు ఇప్పుడు జస్ట్ ఇప్పుడు.
లాస్ట్
ఓకే.
ఓకే.
ఓకే. సో, నేననేది ఏంటంటే ఇప్పుడు ఇది మన రిమైనింగ్ థింగ్స్ అనేవి ఇప్పుడు ఆల్రెడీ 11:25 అయిపోయిందండి. సో, టుమారో మనం ట్రబుల్ షూటింగ్ పార్ట్ కంప్లీట్ చేసిన తర్వాత రిమైనింగ్ ఏవైతే ఉన్నాయో లైక్ కాన్ఫిగరేషన్స్ కానీ రిమైనింగ్ థింగ్స్ విల్ డిస్కస్ అండి. నేను ఇదే
ఓకే
లింక్
ఓకే.
చేస్తానండి. ఇక్కడి నుంచి మనం కంటిన్యూ చేద్దాం. సో, వెరీ ఇంపార్టెంట్.
ఓకే, షూర్ షూర్.
ఫెయిల్యూర్ అయినప్పుడు మనకు సక్సెస్ అయితే ప్రాబ్లమ్ లేదు గానీ, ఫెయిల్యూర్ అయినప్పుడు ఏమేం ప్లేస్‌లో చెక్ చేయాలి? ఎలా ఐడెంటిఫై చేయాలి ఏంటనేది మనం కంటిన్యూ చేద్దాం ఈ క్లాస్‌లో. ఓకే. నేను రిలేటెడ్ డాక్యుమెంట్స్ పంపిస్తాను. ఒకసారి రిఫర్ చేయండి. ఒకవేళ ఆ డాక్యుమెంట్స్ చదివినప్పుడు ఏమి అర్థం కాకపోయినా ప్లీజ్ లెట్ మీ నో అండి. థాంక్ యూ ఫర్ జాయినింగ్ అండి. హావ్ ఎ నైస్ డే.
Yeah, thanks Malesh. Thanks guys. Bye bye.
ఓకే. బాయ్.